Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Ali. I'm a final year medical student at Cambridge University, and it's absolutely lovely to see you. Today we're continuing on our little series where me and two of my friends answered the questions that you guys very kindly sent in via Instagram about exam revision tips. We're going to start with a question that a lot of you asked, which was, how do you apply active recall? How do you recall material that you haven't yet learned? How do you learn stuff in the first place? Secondly, we're going to be talking about our approach to exams when there's only 1 month left, so sort of last minute tips. Thirdly, we've gotten loads of questions about active recall and how you specifically apply that, so we're going to tackle a few questions about that. And we're going to end with subject-specific tips for how to write essays for stuff like English and history, and secondly, how to revise for A-level maths. So yeah, as usual, please don't watch this whole video, it's quite long. Timestamps for all the questions are in the description below, so please kind of look through and find the questions that are most appropriate to you, and you can watch those. Alternatively, if you have a spare half an hour, you can just watch the whole thing, because it's kind of entertaining, I think. Yeah, so let's just go into question 1, and I'll see you at the end. We all know that active recall and spaced repetition are legit techniques for recalling stuff, but before you can recall it, you have to have learned it first. Any tips on actually learning the stuff in the first place? This is a good question. I was going to make a video about this, but do we have any thoughts in the meantime?
About learning stuff?
Yeah, how do you learn it in the first place, rather than, because obviously active recall requires you to have learned it first before you recall it.
I actually feel like there's like a little bit of a misconception there, because so many people are like, oh, I don't want to do the practice paper, or I don't want to ask this question that my teacher has asked me on the spot because I don't know it yet and I feel like I can't do it, I can't access it. You only learn it by doing the active recall. So firstly, just be really willing to give it a go and try the practice paper even if you feel horrendously underprepared for it. Secondly, just the standard stuff that we're all told at school, like the cover test. So you look at it, you read it through, you cover it, you recite what you just read, what you just learnt about leaves, structures, and then see how much of it you got.
So I'm going to make a video about this at some point where I talk about evidence and all that stuff, but basically what I'm going to say is that I think there's a misunderstanding, kind of as Katherine said. People think that, I have to learn it first before I can then revise it. And I don't think that's a helpful way of thinking about it. I think the first thing to think about is that you need to understand it first. Understanding is the most important thing, and I think the litmus test for understanding is, would I be able to explain this to a friend? Would I be able to explain this to a 5-year-old? And if you ask yourself that question after reading through a topic, would I actually be able to explain, hypothyroidism to a 5-year-old? Probably not. Okay, right, let me work out what it is about it that I can't explain. Or like you start off by explaining it. Okay, hypothyroidism, okay, it's obviously where you produce less thyroid hormone. What are the causes of it? Can't quite remember. So you're kind of engaging in that process of active recall in the process of learning the topic and the process of understanding it. And then once you've understood it, once you're able to explain it to a 5-year-old, then you can get to that point where you're starting writing questions for yourself. One of your questions for hypothyroidism might be, what are the causes of hypothyroidism? And then like in a week's time, when you use your spaced repetition, you look at that, you think, what are the causes of hypothyroidism? You realize, oh crap, I can't remember the causes of hypothyroidism. Now you're engaging in active recall. So even though you've understood the topic, you're still struggling to recall it because you've forgotten some of it. So I don't think we can quite get learning away from revising, because like chapter 2 of that book called Make It Stick is entitled To Learn, Retrieve. It's all about retrieving. Retrieving is what drives learning, and without retrieval there is no learning. Without mistakes there is no learning. Let's not think about learning and revision as being separate things.
So kind of related, but taking us on a tangent, I'd like to say that it's so important to actually try questions, so especially like maths questions in particular, because there's one thing reading the answer and thinking, I understand how this works, but it's a completely different thing having a blank question in front of you and trying to work to reason it out. So don't be afraid of, going and trying a question and crashing and burning, and then after that looking at the answer. Because if you don't engage with the question first, if you just go straight and try to read the answer and say like, I know that now, then that's just deceiving yourself.
Yeah.
And you learn far more by engaging with the question.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, because, it's about unknown unknowns. You don't necessarily know where you're going to go wrong until you just give it a go and go, I can't believe I stumbled on this simple step, simplifying the equation. Really, I need to be tighter and double checking everything through to make sure that doesn't happen again. That kind of stuff. On a more practical note as well, in terms of that teaching it to other people, demonstrating that you really understand it yourself. Obviously we don't have any 5-year-olds hanging around, so what we often tend to do is learn a topic each, privately in self-study, and then we try and teach it to each other. Because that way you really check through your understanding, and it's just your mate, so they won't mind if you don't have everything down pat. But then they can ask you questions, and you can go, actually, this is how it works, and feel yourself kind of working through it yourself, and then you'll understand it better. Or alternatively going, actually, I didn't work that bit out myself, I'm going to go look that up.
On that note, this is something that I do quite a lot on placement. It's what a lot of our squad does. Paul is our resident guru on cardiology. So anytime there's something to do with the heart that one of us doesn't get, we like over dinner or something, we're like, Paul, can you explain tricuspid regurgitation to me? And he'd be like, oh, well, what do you know about tricuspid regurgitation so far? He always asks that question, and it's like really annoying but it's good because it forces you to actively recall, what the hell do I know about tricuspid regurgitation? You realize you don't know much, but you give it a go anyway, and then Paul sort of explains it, and he kind of gives you a nice way of doing it. But equally, if Paul would ask me, Ali, well, what MacBook should I get next? I'll be like, oh, that's a very good question, Paul. What MacBook do you think you should get next? We will have a different areas of expertise. And I think kind of working with your friends in this, rather than kind of in competition with your friends, because what I like to do is treat school exams as sort of you and your mates are a team and you're working against the rest of the world, rather than you are an individual and you're working against your mates. And I think a lot of people have this sort of competitive mentality, especially when it comes to medicine applications. I've heard that in a lot of like really elite schools where loads of people apply to medicine. There are people that people come on our BMAT crash course and like, oh, I don't want my friends to know I went on your course because obviously I'm competing against them. It's not a competition. You're like working with your mates. You're competing against the world. So like stick together as much as you can.
I mean, the gains you're going to get from having that kind of sociable morale with your friends is going to be trumping what like little tiny advantage you're getting over 4 other people compared to the thousands of people taking the exam anyway. So even if you think of it from a purely selfish point of view, it's still the wiser thing to do.
Yeah, but don't be selfish. Be friendly with your mates.
Yeah,
work together.
Too.
Fight against the world.
Complete sidetrack from the original question.
What was the original question? Any tips on learning stuff initially? Oh yeah. I mean, that's kind of a tip. Learn with your friends. Learn with your friends, guys. Friends are what make life legit.
Okay, let's move on.
Let's move on. Question number 2. Exams are a month away. Any last minute tips? What would you be doing at this point? Right.
A month? That's loads of time.
A month is not last minute. Like literally, like 10 people messaged me on Instagram being like, "Oh my god, my first GCSE is in a month's time. Any last minute tips?" A month is not last minute. Like I started in my 3rd year, started my spaced repetition thing like 5.5 weeks before the exam. A month is not a long time at all. I love mentioning that point. That was like the only year I actually did well. Absolutely, all the time. A month is not last minute. The question was any tips on what to do a month before the exam?
Everything Ali's already told you about.
Spaced repetition, active recall. A month is not last minute. You just do the same thing.
Although more practically speaking, again, if you feel like you're completely overwhelmed, you've only got a month left and you've just not covered nearly what you'd hoped to by this point, you need to take a step back, take stock of what you have covered, take stock of where the big holes are, and try and fill them. And try and stick to like a general overview of those topics that you really haven't covered enough. Don't try and cover them as much detail as you'd hope for, because you just won't get through them.
Have a plan. You should really, really have a plan. And I'm sure Ali will make a video on this sometime.
We talked in the previous video, the episode 2 of the evidence-based tips, about scoping your subject. That's a phrase I learned from Paul, actually. Can you tell us about scoping your subject?
Nice.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people actually have this fear about work because they look at a topic and they think, oh my goodness, I've got so much to do about this. And actually, it is a really scary thing when you look at all the mountain of work which is waiting for you. So the first thing you need to do is to bite that bullet and to write down every single thing that you need to do. And then as you write that down, you start thinking, oh, maybe I can, just maybe if I put this into this week and that thing into the other week, and so long as I stick to my timetable, I will get to the end of it and I will have finished the mountain of work. But the absolute worst error to do is to be scared of it, and then you decide that, okay, I'm just going to float through the next month and do a bit of this, do a bit of that, because by the time you get to the end of the month, you'll realize that you haven't actually covered the whole subject. You've just been too scared to deal with the elephant in the room. So you need to write it all down and then put it into divisible chunks that you think you might be able to handle. If it's too much, then decide to not revise some things really, even. And then actually you realize that you can do it. It is actually manageable.
I completely agree with Paul. It's so easy to just keep telling yourself, oh, I'm just gonna keep going, keep doing the bits, just spot things and do them as when, and keep jumping from subject to subject as you feel more and more panicked about the ones you haven't covered. But really, doing that hard step at the start and going, okay, I'm gonna actually sit down, look at everything I need to do, figure out how I'm gonna piece it all together, and that's gonna be so much more important.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I always say, one of the most useful things, like probably the most useful thing you can do with a given hour or 2 hours, is to sit down and on a single page write down every single topic that is in your syllabus. And or like in the form of a spider diagram or in the form of a sort of numbered list, anything like that. So you see, okay, I've really only got 15 topics. And if I've got a month before my exam, that means if I do one topic a day, I can do each topic twice before my exam. Fantastic. Or, topics 1 to 5 are kind of the fundamentals of chemistry. I know those already. Let me focus on topics 6 to 15. That means I can do them 3 times before. Oh, perfect. So, just like writing down a list of every single topic and kind of in a manageable chunk, as Paul said, rather than, each nitty-gritty detail of the specification. I hate specifications. That's a good way of kind of scoping your subject, seeing kind of visually, what do I have left to do? And you can check out my magical spreadsheet method, which was referenced in the last video if you want more information on this.
That is the absolute key. That's what I start every revision session doing. As in, when I'm revising for exam, that's the first thing I always do. And it will absolutely suck. Like, it just feels so bad sitting there and writing out all the things you need to do, but it's so necessary.
Absolutely. Any tips on how to learn content quickly? Exams are a month away and we haven't even finished some of our courses yet. How do you learn stuff quickly?
Broad brush strokes. Don't go into the crazy nitty-gritty detail, especially if you're kind of an anxious studier and feel like you need to cover everything. Force yourself to take that step back, work out what you really actually do need to know, what's actually testable knowledge, what's come up in past papers, that kind of thing. Study smart.
Absolutely. Do some kind of 80-20 analysis. Look at, which 20% of the content gets you 80% of the marks in a lot of past papers. Analysis of the past papers, base your revision around your past papers. That's the key. How do your techniques change 1 month, 2 weeks, 1 week before the exam?
Spaced repetition. Go back to shit you covered. Oh.
It's fine, you can swear.
Can I? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
here we go.
Go back to shit you've covered before. Try and, especially if you've picked out where you often go wrong in a certain type of exam question or on a certain topic in general. For instance, abdominal exam. I always forget to go down to the patient's level so that you don't look as intimidating. And I know I always forget that. So going over closer to the exam, I want to be reminding myself of the common stuff I do wrong so that I definitely nail it on the day.
One thing I like to ask myself pretty much every day before any kind of exam study session is, if I had the exam right now, which topic would I be most shitting myself about? And I study that topic. And closer to the exam, I start asking myself this with a lot more frequency. So then I really try and focus in on the topics that I really, really don't know. Because we all have that feeling of like, oh, if the thyroid examination came up, it wouldn't be good. That's how you know that's a topic that you need to work on.
Yeah, and as Paul's mentioned before, often that's the kind of sinking feeling in your gut type topic, and so you avoid it because you're scared and because you know it's going to be crap to do that topic, but you just got to face up and do it. You will save yourself so much hassle in the long term.
All right, next question. With active recall, do you make the questions as you read the book, or do you make notes from the textbook first and then read them and then quiz yourself? How do you do it?
Either, both. Next question.
It really doesn't matter. Active recall is not a specific formula you follow, and I apologize sincerely if I've given you the impression that there is a specific series of things that you need to do. Active recall is just about, actively retrieving stuff from your brain. If you enjoy making notes from the textbook, fine. Make your notes and base your active recall questions on those. If you don't like making notes, I don't like making notes. I think revision guides are amazing. I love CGP, I love Let's revision guides. I use exclusively those and make my questions based on that, or use their kind of end of chapter questions. It really doesn't matter as long as you're making your brain work. Do whatever you feel like, do whatever works for you.
I'd actually say, just, to counter that a little bit,
Fine.
You can try and not let yourself shy away from using great resources that are already out there. A lot of people kind of take a lot of comfort in making their own notes, and especially if they're making those notes and basically copying it out on note form and not actually doing any active recall whilst they're making those notes. Obviously that's easier because you don't have to force yourself to think of what you've just learned. But there's with amazing revision guides out there, all the amazing resources you get online nowadays, you should be using those. You should be forcing yourself to do that hard active recall stuff sooner rather than later.
Yeah, if you can avoid making your own notes, in my opinion, avoid it completely. What do you reckon? Yeah. Cool.
I think it's part of the processing and part of the understanding, so if you're struggling with the topic, making notes can really help.
All right, next question. How should I use active recall? Do past papers count? Yes, they do. Right, next question. But make sure you attempt the question before you look at the mark scheme. Don't do that thing of, I'm just going to read through the mark scheme. Yeah. Oh yeah, I knew that. I knew that. I would have totally written that, because that's an absolute myth.
Absolute myth.
All right, next question.
Good contribution there, Paul.
Absolute myth. Yeah, we said it earlier.
We did say it earlier.
Complete
Next
myth.
question. If you have Anki, flashcard app, why do you still use your spreadsheet method? Thank you, you watched my vlog. Surely you can do all that stuff on Anki with custom decks and filters and stuff.
Oh,
How do
it's
you
funny you should say that.
We were having this argument like
Yeah.
literally earlier today.
Yeah.
I was using my spreadsheets for some OSCE practice and Katherine was saying, but why are you using a spreadsheet? Why not just use Anki? The reason is spreadsheets make it easy. Anything, in my opinion, that reduces friction between what you think you want to do and actually doing it is worth doing. This is why I spend lots of money on camera equipment that purely just reduces the friction between kind of me sitting down and making a video. Having a tripod is worth a £50 expense rather than stacking lots of books high and putting a camera on lots of books. This is why I prefer my spreadsheet method to Anki for a lot of things, because spreadsheet is just so easy to do. Anki is a bit of effort to set up. If you've got it set up already, then maybe it works for you.
Translation, he's a bit lazy and doesn't really know how to use the features. No, it is true that it's a lot more intuitive to do Ali's spreadsheet method. You can sort it by category a lot easier. You don't have to do this whole tagging versus whether you put stuff in different decks versus using filter decks, etc., which can be a bit more high effort.
Yeah. So Anki takes a lot of work to set up. If you can't be bothered, use the spreadsheet method. I can rarely be bothered to use Anki properly. There's all these weird things with Anki, like close completions and like image masking that loads of people swear by. But I like to keep it simple. Google Sheets. Yeah, sorted.
I would actually say on that point though, if you're not willing to do Anki properly, don't do it all. Just use paper flashcards or a spreadsheet method if you know that that's going to be a way you can organize easily and not have loads of flashcards covering stupid little details, that kind of thing.
Yeah, one problem people often have with Anki is they're like, oh, I spent like 18 hours like making my Anki flashcards, and then I realized that I just made so many that I just can't be bothered to go through them. I think you vaguely had this problem at one point in your life.
In first year, I think I had like 4,000 plus cards, and I definitely didn't get through them.
Yeah, in first year you were all about, oh my god, Anki's amazing, and you were teaching me how to use all these techniques.
Well, anatomy cards and the image occlusion thing, it's just great, but then you realise you've overdone it and covered lots of niche details you didn't need to cover. It's a difficult relationship.
Indeed.
I use neither.
Yeah, Paul doesn't use any flashcards. He's
just the boss.
Yeah, how do you do it?
Well, I mean, active recall doesn't require you to have Anki or to use a Google Sheets. It's a way of life.
What do you mean it's a way of life?
It's just just try to use it. Try to think about things every time before you look up the answer.
But like how
every single time.
So like, do you write questions for yourself?
Well, not exactly. I mean, even for example, if you were to do the hand examination again, you just think about in your mind, mentally rehearse it as far as you get, and then the bits of which you get unstuck.
Okay, but if we use an example, so like think back to when you were doing A-levels all those years ago, sort of, or like in maths, how did you use active recall?
That's a jibe at how old Paul is, by the way.
Yeah.
Paul is very old. He's from Singapore, so he did this 3 years in the army and all that stuff.
2 years.
2 years, fine. How did you do it when you were in A-levels?
I mean, there are tons of practice papers out there. So there's so many opportunities for you to test yourself. Every time, at the end of the day, the exams are about testing knowledge. So you will come across questions. You will get to something and you'll be like, aha, what is this? And then before you look at the answer up, just think about reason from first principle. Try to dredge up that knowledge from that, that subconscious bit of your brain. And then you'll find that when you actually read the answer, it sticks better. Yeah.
That's a really good quote. Active recall is not just about flashcards. Active recall is a way of life.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
That's
We should get it made
absolutely
on
sick.
t-shirts or something.
Yeah, or like a little
it could
plaque.
be your version of Ibs mugs.
Oh my god, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Oh,
Perfect.
so instead of bring them your seasoning, we can be active recall is a way of life. Let us know in the comments if you would purchase those mugs for about £7.
Gosh.
Thank you. I just created a movement.
All right. Okay. Now we're going on to subject-specific stuff. So question number, I've lost count. How do you apply flashcards for essay-based subjects like history and English lit? I find they're working well for biology, but I'm not really sure how to use them for analysis subjects. I love using flashcards to memorize particular paragraphs. So I use flashcards extensively for my second and third year essays, and quite a lot of the time, with any kind of subject that you do, any kind of essay subject, there are certain building blocks that go into lots of different essays. So let's say you're doing Romeo and Juliet. You can probably make a point about how Samson and Gregory at the start are using lewd imagery and blah, 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 how this was relevant to like the Victorian times. Was it the Victorian times? No, Elizabethan times.
Good one.
All of this, you can probably make that point in loads of different essays. So if you memorize a really sick paragraph that has a sick quote that you've like gotten from Romeo and Juliet, and put it into Anki and like learn this paragraph off by heart, you can chuck it into whatever essay you want. Equally, if you're doing medicine and you know, you want to talk about the evidence behind the sodium pump and how like Hodgkin and Huxley did some experiments on like the giant squid axon in like 1942. You can memorize that paragraph and chuck it into like 10 different essays about the sodium pump. That's how I would use Anki to memorize stuff for essays.
Yeah,
Dates,
so basically,
quotes.
yeah, dates and quotations.
Yeah.
And evidence base, that kind of thing.
Cool. Next question. Any tips for A-level maths? How do you
Wait,
use...
sorry, just 1 second. So when you said paragraph, you did kind of mean like the paragraph is in like the citation and then the sentence from said paragraph, right?
No, literally
I
the
mean,
entire
do
Do you mean like
paragraph.
the whole paragraph?
Literally for my psych essays, I had entire paragraphs
Yeah.
committed to
Wow.
memory,
Literally.
including references.
Using the example would be like Romeo and Juliet, Elizabethan, so something like some prompt, and then you
Yeah.
would just spurt out. You know,
Yeah, and like
regurgitate
I would
that
like craft this paragraph in like exquisite detail and just kind of regurgitate it like word for word, literally memorized it using Anki. And especially for introductions to essays, because you know a lot of the times the introduction is a really hard bit to write, and if you can like hit the examiner with an absolutely killer introduction, then you kind of prime them to give you a decent mark at the end of the essay. So you know, memorizing introductions was something that I did for my second and third year essays. You know.
They usually lose interest after introduction, so you really have to hit them
Yeah.
with introduction.
So memorize your introductions using flashcards. That's how you do essay subjects.
I'm out essays.
You're saying I was just thinking
No, I'm
that
out
cheeky
essays.
look.
Yeah.
That cheeky look was
Oh yeah,
from you
Paul's-
going,
I'm
yeah,
out
I do
essays.
get bored.
Paul is a Cambridge supervisor. He marks essays. He marks like
Yeah.
supervisor essays.
By
But
the
he gets
time-
bored after the introduction.
By the time you get to your fourth essay, all the essays just blur into one. So in your introduction, if you can interest your whoever's marking your essay and then outline where you're gonna go. From there, they can tell whether you're gonna get a first or a 2-1, 2-2. Genuinely, yeah.
Cool, sorted. Any tips for A-level maths? How do you use past papers to your advantage?
We've talked about this before. Just do the paper. Like, do the paper and don't just look at the answer.
One thing that helps is when revising for maths, what a lot of textbooks do is that they put the questions in a logical structure. Like, you know, you find all the areas of a square first, and then you find all the areas of a rectangle, and then you find all the areas of a circle, and you kind of do a lot of things, and then a lot of things, and a lot of things, and you kind of block them out like that. They've done studies on maths students and maths papers, and they realized that actually if you interleave all of the different problems that you're doing, that for some reason improves your performance by quite a lot. So, you know, when you're revising for maths, maybe don't think, okay, today I'm going to revise trigonometry. Maybe think, today I'm going to do a bit of trigonometry, a bit of Pythagoras, part of trigonometry, a bit of algebra, a bit of shapes, and a bit of all that BS
You're
stat
really
stuff.
struggling to remember.
I'm really struggling to remember what on earth comes up in GCSE
Vectors,
and A-level
power
maths.
series,
All of that stuff. You know, just like try and
matrices.
kind
I did it so much.
yeah.
He loves
good time
maths.
with
Do
Yeah,
a bit,
Just
a bit of this,
loves
bit of that, bit of this, bit of that. Use the past papers to your advantage. Like really actively attempt the question, even if you think you can't do it, and then focus in on why you didn't do it. Solutions are really good for that, not just answers. So you see the worked solution, you see how it goes. Cool.
Maths is about practice. Maths is really about practice. So, yeah.
Yeah, cool. Finally, subject specific. Any tips for essay exam technique? Any tips to write a really good essay? We kind of talked about this already. Hit them with the introduction. Any tips from you? You're the supervisor.
Introduction really matters, conclusion really matters, and actually how your essay looks really matters as well. If you're a person who has bad handwriting, it's really, really worth getting better, improving your handwriting. I think in Tripod's handwriting is worth up to 5%, 3 to 5%.
Tripos is the Cambridge exams.
Okay, so if they can't read your handwriting, they can't see all your wonderful ideas that come out from your head.
To be honest, I reckon if you're doing an essay exam, the single biggest thing you can do to improve your marks is improve your handwriting. You can do it. There are loads of YouTube videos about how to improve your handwriting. Like literally take the time to do it, because it's such a pain in the bum reading an essay you
so
can't read.
important, yeah.
And you just really annoy the examiner. It's so annoying reading a BMAT essay with bad handwriting.
You want to look at your essay from far afterwards and be like, oh no, this looks like a beautiful essay. It's a work of art. I'm
Yeah.
proud of this. You know, it gives good vibes to the examiner.
Probably more importantly, you want to get someone else to read it and see if they can recognise handwriting when it's not, you know, you reading your own thing.
Yeah, it's all about just developing sick handwriting, and you can do it. Please don't say, oh, my handwriting is crap, I don't know how to improve. You can do it if you really work on it. Okay, so that was me, Paul and Katherine answering 10 different questions that you guys had about specific study techniques. I hope you found something useful from that. The previous video we were talking about like motivation, stress, time management, so if you're into that sort of thing you can watch that. And in the next video we'll be tackling questions that were sent in by university students, so stuff, you know, more about lectures and essays and managing the huge amount of workload that you get at university. So yeah, I hope you got something from this video. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. Have a lovely evening and I'll see you in the next video. Good luck with your revision. Bye bye.